In the 1970s, maverick filmmaker Steven Spielberg thought up this alien invasion tale when he read about a similar story happening at a Kentucky farmhouse. Columbia Pictures firmly wanted Spielberg to write on the coattails of his sci-fi hit Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but he had no interest in telling that kind of a story, or having them greenlight a sequel. Instead, he wanted to go darker and direct a horror film. Spielberg recruited Rick Baker, whom was head of makeup special effects for An American Werewolf in London, and writer John Sayles. While filming Raiders of the Lost Ark, they saw some prototypes that Baker had developed, and Spielberg was thrilled. But when a first draft of the script came in, he realized that the most emotional and visceral aspect of the story involved the lead alien having a friendly and heartwarming bond with the lead protagonist's autistic boy. Spielberg decided to shelve the dark project and the $700,000 that went into the prototypes that Baker had developed, and created E.T.
I'll be right here.
Spielberg would later in his career create darker alien action fare with the likes of War of the Worlds and TV's Taken and Falling Skies. We all have seen Christopher Reeve's Superman films, Saving Lois Lane, The President of the United States, Richard Pryor, all from the evil forces of the universe. But after the box office and critical failure of Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, Jerry Siegel's hit comic book film series needed a shot of adrenaline. Enter Jon Peters, producer of Tim Burton's Batman films and other hit films such as Rain Man, whom bought the rights to the Superman film franchise from Warner Bros. In 1993. He commissioned a writer by the name of Jonathan Lemkin to write a draft entitled Superman Reborn. Independent filmmaker Kevin Smith, while having a meeting with the producer at Warner Bros., whom was told about the stalling project, jumped at the chance to be a part of it. First being hired as a consultant for the project, he would later be commissioned by the studio to write a draft under Peters' guidance. He retitled the film Superman Lives. They had a series of hilarious exchanges, which you can hear about on An Evening with Kevin Smith Volume 1 or on YouTube. After 2 drafts of the screenplay, the studio liked the direction it was going in and hired Tim Burton to helm the project. Burton wanted to bring his own writers in and shelved Smith's series of drafts. Oscar-winning actor Nicolas Cage was brought on to wear the superhero tights. However, after a year on the project and public mutiny between Peters and Burton, the project was shelved. It would take 19 years after Superman 4 for the next Superman film to be released. Having been a performer his whole life, Roscoe Arbuckle traveled with the theater circuit starting from when he was a teenager until way into his 20s. He signed with Paramount Studios in 1921 for a 3-year deal for an unprecedented $1 million. To celebrate, him and his friends threw a Labor Day party in San Francisco, and that is when the trouble started. Accused of murder, he was acquitted of all charges, but the scandal severed his career. Hollywood loved the idea of making an autobiographical film of a falling star, whom also was a pioneer and icon of the comedy genre. For the right actor to take on Arbuckle, he would have to be larger than life, not just matching his 250-pound frame size, but also his grand appetite to entertain. A few comedians and actors have fit that kind of profile in the last several decades, but unfortunately, akin to Arbuckle, all died tragically young. Known as one of the most cursed projects in Hollywood history, the likes of John Belushi, John Candy, and Chris Farley were all at one time or another set to portray the late performer's life. Even Jackass star Preston Lacy was also at one point set to embody Roscoe. Known as being one of the pioneers of American slapstick, along with Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, Roscoe will forever live on in infamy, not only because of the scandal, but also because of his contribution to early American cinema. Since then, Jerry Stahl wrote a novel entitled I, Fatty in 2004, which Arbuckle was the subject of. Although the adaptation was completed in 1984 by David Lynch, we felt we had to include this entry, considering the notoriety of the avant-garde filmmaker Alejandro Jodorowsky's 2014 documentary, which chronicled his unique and otherworldly vision for the adaptation. Dune tells the story of a noble family who accepts the planet Arrakis from an interstellar society, which is the only planet that contains the most valuable substance known to man. The control of Arrakis is the most coveted and dangerous undertaking. A film, a sci-fi miniseries, board games, and computer games have been adapted from the novel. Hadn't read the book, but being persuaded by friends, he jumped at the chance to direct the sci-fi saga. He worked endlessly for 2 years on the script and storyboards and assembled Orson Welles, Mick Jagger, David Carradine, and Salvador Dali, whom demanded a salary of $100,000 per minute of screen time. Pink Floyd also signed on to the film to provide the score. Having the size of a phone book for a script, which would have amounted to 14 hours screen time, and a plethora of storyboard sketches that culminated every camera move and composition, the studio backed off and the film was shelved. Many people claim that the storyboards used to illustrate Jodorowsky's vision for Dune helped conceptualize the popular sci-fi franchises Alien, Terminators, and others. Everyone has heard of Citizen Kane, The Touch of Evil, and The Third Man, which many people call some of the greatest films of all time. But as far as the general public goes, that is where the name Orson Welles starts and ends. What happened after those films? Well, after the death of his longtime friend Ernest Hemingway in 1961, it ignited a light bulb over Welles' head. To make a film about a burly bullfight enthusiast who comes to befriend a young bullfighter and ultimately train him to be what Welles calls his own dream of himself. Welles later changed the protagonist to a film director. He started shooting the film in 1970 with Peter Bogdanovich and John Huston starring. Welles ran into tax problems in 1971 and had to work on other projects just to pay his debt. Filming shortly resumed. Welles had photographed the film utilizing color, black and white, and still imagery for a hypnotic effect. Trouble started later on when one of the Iranian investors allegedly embezzled Orson's money and didn't follow through with securing a missing chunk of the budget. Bogdanovich would have to put in $500,000 of his own money as filming went on. Finally, in January 1976, filming completed. In 1979, while Welles' lengthy post-production process chugged on, legal and financial issues mounted as ownership of the film came into question, with Welles' own daughter, the brother-in-law of the Shah of Iran, and others wanting a piece of the pie. Backers for the film came and went, with A-list filmmakers being asked to help complete it after Welles' 1985 untimely death. In May of 2015, an Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign was initiated with the hopes of raising $1 million in equity. But after 40 days of the campaign, they fell short, raising just a little over $400,000, causing the film to lie dormant.